from wherever you are joining. Welcome to this important webinar on bridging water, sanitation, and climate agendas, hosted by the Sanitation Water for All Partnership. My name is Anjani Kapoor, and I'm the Head of Policy, Accountability, and Results at SWA. I'm delighted to be your moderator today. Before we dive into the main discussion, I would like to highlight some housekeeping, as usual, because we are in a virtual setup. We offer interpretation services in English and French today for session 1, which you can access by clicking the globe at the bottom right corner of your screen. Please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit your questions there, and let's keep the discussion going in the chat box as well. Now let's quickly look at the agenda. Alicia, could I have the agenda slide, please? As the agenda slide is coming up, I can briefly introduce what we are going to do today. Today, we will take a quick trip back to Baku to reflect on the outcomes of COP29 and discuss how we can prioritize water and sanitation further as we head towards COP30 in Belém. We are fortunate to have an incredible lineup of speakers with us today, including representatives, as you can see on your screen, from global, regional, and national levels who are dedicated to advancing this crucial agenda of strengthening the nexus between water, climate, sanitation agendas. So without further delay, I invite Patrick Moriarty, the CEO of IRC and the chair of Sanitation and Water for All Steering Committee. Patrick's intervention will focus on how effectively and strategically Sanitation and Water for All and its partners have brought together water, sanitation, and climate sectors through high-level initiatives and advocacy. I'm confident that Patrick's opening remarks will set a strong foundation for our discussion today. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Anjani, and again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to say a few opening words, both on my own behalf and on behalf of Sanitation and Water for All CEO Katarina de Albuquerque, for this very important global webinar that we're all part of. So, as we all know, the climate crisis is also a water and sanitation crisis. Extreme weather events, rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns are already disrupting access to essential basic services, including safe drinking water and sanitation. And, as always, the most vulnerable communities are those who are impacted most. As SWA works with climate stakeholders, one thing is clear. Securing universal access to water and sanitation services cannot happen in isolation. We must embrace the full breadth of Sustainable Development Goal 6, which means ensuring that water, sanitation and hygiene services are delivered in the context of sustainable water resource management and the protection of aquatic water ecosystems. At COP28, the world adopted the UAE Framework for Global Climate Resilience, a landmark achievement that finally placed water and sanitation at the centre of global climate adaptation. SWA and our partners played a key role in shaping that framework, ensuring that water and sanitation are not an afterthought but a priority in global resilience efforts. But we can't stop at agreements. We now have to act to turn the framework into reality. As chair of SWA's steering committee, I've seen firsthand the power of political leadership in driving real change for water, sanitation and climate action. Alongside our partners, we're proud to be working with presidents and prime ministers who are championing these issues through our heads of state initiatives. This October, just before COP30, SWA will convene a high-level ministerial meeting in Madrid, our sector ministers meeting, bringing together ministers of water, sanitation and the environment to coordinate strong political commitments ahead of the COP. This will be a crucial milestone, not only for COP30, but also in the lead up to the 2026 UN Water Conference. We must together ensure that water and sanitation have a permanent place in climate negotiations moving forward. So I call on all SWA partners to actively engage in this process, whether through national climate planning, global advocacy, or technical collaboration. Let's work together to ensure that COP30 delivers outcomes for those communities most affected by the climate crisis. And in closing, I'd like to extend my deepest thanks to all of the speakers joining us today for their time and expertise. I look forward to today's discussions and to working together to drive meaningful change. Thanks very much. And back to you, Anjani.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your opening remarks and giving us that line of sight to various global events where advocacy can be strengthened further, including the sector ministers meeting, which is right before COP30, as you rightly said. Now we transition to our keynote speakers. First up is we have Alex Simalabwi, the CEO and the Executive Secretary of the Global Water Partnership Organization joining us. For several years now, Alex, you have been playing this key role at the interface of water and climate at GWP. Your leadership in significant initiatives like the Africa Investment Program showcases your commitment to sustainable water solutions. So without further ado, let's hear from Alex. Over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just say thank you for the opportunity to invite me to participate. At very short notice, but I said yes, even though it was short notice, because this is an extremely important agenda, and we're very close partners with Sanitation and Water for All, and we believe in what the organization has been doing. So I also want to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank most of you who have been sending in messages of congratulations in my new role as the CEO of the Global Water Partnership. I think we've been working with you for the last couple of years. So I just want to say I was not able to respond to most of you personally, but please, thank you very much. And I thank you for your support and pledging support to support me and the Global Water Partnership as we try to go through a transformation agenda for the organization, which is urgently needed to help to transform water systems in the context of the global climate emergency that we face. So we know each other, and just to also mention that I have been requested here to speak specifically about the lessons learned in mobilizing climate and water investments through a signature initiative that most of you are aware of, the Continental Africa Water Investment Program, the AIP, which is a program of the African Union that GWP is part of the Secretariat in Africa. So I think overall, I just want to say the Global Water Partnership, as you've seen over the last couple of years and months, has gone through a lot of changes and governance issues. The organization is now stepping forward into a new transformative agenda that is much needed as we march towards 2030. And this is going to focus very much around accelerating climate resilient water investments at scale and at speed, because this is what we need to mobilize those investments. So the decision of the Global Water Partnership Steering Committee, together with other partners, is to catalyze the lessons learned from the Africa Water Investment Program towards what is going to be called the Global Investment Program on Water and Climate Resilience, GIP, an initiative that is going to be co-developed with other partners, but as well as the leaders in the G20 and other high-level leaders. Why do we have to do this? We've learned from the Africa Investment Program that you need three key things to advance climate resilient investments. You need a high-level engagement, policy level, heads of states, heads of government. Sanitation and Water is doing that, and it's excellent. We have that also in the AIP. You need investments to flow at scale. And I'm not talking here small little monies that cannot be absorbed by countries, but we need to fix the absorption capacities, but we need to be able to find ways to deploy investments at scale for the MDBs, but also for the governments to be able to accelerate their absorption capacity by improving how finance is utilized. And finally, we need to be able to mobilize domestic finance. And this requires collaboration with the governments. So it's not a question of developing countries giving aid, because that is not sufficient. You need all parties to come together. So the three levels have to come together. And underlying this is also a key lesson that we learned on the AIP, data. Data is absolutely important because there cannot be adequate investment decision without data. So this is why through the AIP, you have what's called the Africa Water Investment Scorecard, which is a data monitoring information tool that is being implemented by many African countries to try and mobilize investments, but also indicate what the current status in terms of the investment climate environment in each country, the current status of investment mobilization from both domestic, private sector, and it's not just a question of how much money is budgeted for, how much is actually deployed, and how much is actually utilized, and how much actually goes to the targeted beneficiaries. So the scorecard tries to do that, and this is really significant. So I don't have a lot of time to be able to give you the full lessons, but all I can say is that we are going to be building on the track record of the AIP to mobilize global leadership at the highest level of governments, working in partnership with the G20. We have already begun that journey with South Africa, who is the G20 current chair. And South Africa, we are supporting them to convene an inaugural Africa Water Investment Summit and Climate Investment Summit, hopefully later in the year, in the context of the G20 presidents. So we'll be looking forward to work with you as we try to advance this agenda. And finally, AIP aims to mobilize 30 billion investments by 2030. What has been the progress to date? Over 7.5 billion investments have been influenced. Domestic investments from governments, where governments have pledged to say, we are going to pledge to mobilize domestic finance up to 7.5 billion within a very short period of time. So the track record is there, and we invite Sanitation and Water for All and other partners to join hands with the Global Water Partnership as we embark on this transformation agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. Passionate as ever, the advocate for financing for water, sanitation, and hygiene. And as you rightly said, that's where we overlap on pushing through this high-level political prioritization for water, sanitation, and hygiene. Alex, thank you for joining at the short notice. Congratulations again. And we will knock on your door very soon, given it's Africa's first G20. And I think you've set the scene beautifully for that advocacy and alignment as well. Thank you, Alex. I see we have Animesh joining us. So let's transition to Animesh. Animesh Kumar is the head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction in Bonn. Mr. Kumar has been actively involved in shaping discussions around the global goal on adaptation, and his office has been instrumental in the loss and damage resolutions. We are glad to have you with us, Animesh, as this is your first intervention in an SWA webinar, if I'm not wrong. The floor is yours, and we can't wait to hear your insights. Animesh, when you're speaking, please choose English as your language of choice or whichever you're speaking, and we also have French. Over to you, Animesh, please.
Thanks, Anjani, and thanks, colleagues. A very warm good morning from Bonn. What I would do, I have a few slides in case I'm given the... Okay, I think I have the right to share now, so I'll do that. Just a moment. So what I have done is to just put together a few slides to illustrate the focus on both loss and damage, as well as the loss and the global goal on adaptation. Can you see my screen, or you're not seeing the right thing?
Not yet, Animesh, not yet.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I think we have got too much used to Teams and Zoom these days.
I can totally imagine. It's coming up now.
Right.
Perfect. We can see it.
Excellent. So I was just saying that I would focus a bit on global goal and adaptation and just the latest on it, and not speaking on behalf of the UNFCCC Secretariat, which holds the custodian pen on that, but more as an expert member working on the global goal and adaptation and developing its indicators. I have been following this process since the very inception. There was a very high expectation that the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, for which we are the custodians, can benefit and inspire some of the work going under the adaptation. So both during the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh action plan work, when the targets were solidified and adopted in Dubai, and subsequently from Dubai, the work ongoing in terms of adoption of the indicators. These do provide a lot of opportunities for colleagues working on water. So it was a big win for everyone working in the water sector, water and sanitation in particular, because the first target of the global goal on adaptation actually is on, okay, I think I need to, sorry. Yeah, now you see this full screen, right?
Yes, I can see the full screen.
Exactly. Yeah, so the first target of water was so first target of global goal and adaptation was on water. And if you look at the highlighted portions of the whole target, it does talk about everything starting from water scarcity on the one side, water-related hazards, ensuring resilient water supply and sanitation, and potable water. So it covers the full spectrum of the sector on water. But just not limiting ourselves to the water-related target, that there are other 6 targets as well under the thematic target, where you would see that water is embedded in one way or the other. Whether it is about agriculture, where we talk about food insecurity and hence a natural connection with water, or ecosystem, where water is very much embedded through the water-related and wetlands, or infrastructure in terms of the water-related infrastructure. So you would see that, and it's still to be seen how indicators will be framed in terms of each of these targets. We are still working on it, but there's a very high likelihood that water-related indicators and matrix will be very much part of this process. Linked with this is what's happening on the adaptation cycle related targets. I'm not sure how much colleagues are aware of it. For example, we do have 7 thematic targets that we saw in the previous slide, and we have 4 process-related targets, which we call as the adaptation cycle targets. This relate to risk assessment, planning and implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. What I've done is to look across these different 4 targets and seen what are the things where water-related indicators or processes would be relevant. For example, there is a very specific element of the first target, which is on early warnings for all. And water-related hazards constitute almost 90% of the hazards that we have been documented so far. Under early warnings for all, for example, water really forms a big portion, whether it's about scarcity of water leading to drought or excess of water leading to flood, these 2 being the most common hazards. So early warning systems provide a very strong basis for water-related indicators. So is also the case with the national adaptation plans, where it is about monitoring or enhancing capacity. Soon, all of us will also be made further aware of the new NAP technical guidelines that are currently in the process of finalization. They will be launched at the LDC expert group in Angola and subsequently shared for wider dissemination at the next NAP Expo that's happening in Lusaka. So these NAP technical guidelines would be unique. Not much is known about them because it is very much under the wraps by the parties. But what we know about it in the campus here in Bonn is that it will not just be limited to the overarching process of adaptation planning, but also integrate different sectors, in particular what you saw in the previous slide, including water, in a very assimilated way across the guidelines. So it is expected that the new generation of NAPs that the countries will start working on will be much more inclusive of water-related factors. So I will shortly then move into what's happening on the loss of damage space, having talked about adaptation both at the global level and at the national level. We do have very clear opportunities of integration of water into the loss and damage processes. When I just joined the webinar today, the speaker before me was talking about data as a big opportunity. We have done an analysis of the key demands that the countries would be making for loss and damage related support, and data does form a big portion of that. And this is very much evident because countries now do have facilities available to them, and I'll come to them shortly under loss and damage. But if we cannot quantify our loss and damage, we cannot turn them into a demand in terms of the support that they need. So data, policy, and finance are the 3 key denominators of coherent action, water being a common factor, where it is about understanding our observed losses or future losses through data, having a more comprehensive risk management approaches towards tackling adaptation, disaster reduction, and humanitarian action in a much more streamlined way rather than in silos. or streamlining our financing, because finance ambition needs to be increased, but we also need to maximize what exists. As of now, finance is often scattered across development, disaster risk reduction, humanitarian, adaptation, and loss and damage. And the interesting part is that all these 5 domains are underfunded. So we will not be able to do any further service to us if we duplicate each other's resources. And it only makes sense that we streamline and maximize what exists while looking for scaling up further the ambition on financing. So there are some examples through which this is already being done. For example, we in UNDRR are the custodian of disaster risk reduction data. 112 countries currently have collected data on losses and damages, and 163 countries are officially reporting on many factors on SDGs and Sendai framework. We're also using this to inform the loss and damage processes, including intergovernmental processes. I already talked about GGA. The global goal already includes all the indicators from Sendai, and we're also supporting the AVAS process for the SIDS in terms of the matrix that we already have. This is an interesting map when it comes to the policy imperative. The countries that you see in light blue are the ones that have a disaster risk reduction plan only. The countries that are in green are the ones that have only a NAP. The countries that are in dark blue are the ones that have both. And the countries that are in red have neither. The countries that have neither are the ones we should ensure that they get the required support to co-create coherent policies rather than duplicating and working across silos, across ministries. The countries that have one but not the other, they can build upon what already exists. And the countries that have both can co-implement through common action plans. So we have very good experience on this. We have been working on it for the last several years. And a suite of tools have been put forward. And
Animesh, sorry, could you wrap it, please,
Sure.
quickly? Thank you so much. And
Okay.
apologies for interrupting.
So these are the tools which are available. I also wanted to touch base a bit on finance, but let me go straight to 2 key mechanisms available on loss and damage. We as UNDRR are the host of the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage, together with our colleagues in UNOPS. The function of Santiago Network is heavily focused on technical assistance to countries, which is demand-driven and provides very key opportunities for all the people working in the water sector, because that has come up as a key demand for countries to enhance their capacity. The first country being assisted is Vanuatu. We have received requests from other countries as well. And all the stakeholders, including those in the call, can join Santiago Network and become its implementing partners and hence access funding. The shop is open and please go ahead and start accessing the resources. The other mechanism is the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. The fund was also launched earlier in Sharm el-Sheikh. The governing processes are already in place, and this covers the full spectrum of loss and damage as well. The Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage and on Santiago Network are meant to work in close coherence. Just 2 days back, on Friday here in Bonn, the fund and the Santiago Network have signed a letter of intent to work together. The current pledges for Santiago Network is around 50 million, and for fund is 750 million. So there's some funding available and more needs to be done, but we will be working further. So I'll end there and making an open call for people, both in terms of the global platform that happens in June this year in Geneva, followed by the subsidiary body meetings in Bonn in the second half of June. And if you have any further interest on Santiago Network, feel free to contact us through the email address given there. Thanks to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Animesh. And there's a lot to discuss, right? This organic narrative, even in disasters, wherein water plays a central role in as in too much or too little of water as well. So I think we will roll up our sleeves as a sector to find these entry points, and we will come back to you for discussions on COP30, but also for discussions on sector ministers meeting that the Sanitation Water for All Partnership will be hosting later in the year. Thank you so much. We know you have to step out, but it was great having you at our webinar today. And we now move on to our next speaker. We have Alejandro Jimenez, the Director of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene at the Stockholm International Water Institute, SIWI. SIWI is an important partner in the SWA Research and Learning constituency, as well as the SWA Climate Task Team. Alejandro has been actively involved in helping countries incorporate water into their climate policy. So we look forward to hearing some of your insights today. Welcome, Alejandro. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Yeah, I think I would like to have a few comments based on our experience supporting over 30 countries in the recent years in aspects of integration between water and climate policies, and I will focus my intervention on that. So one key important element is that it's not for granted that climate and water stakeholders are sitting together at the same table. And actually, I welcome very much the previous intervention with this new wave and integration of NAP processes, because we have seen as well that there have been many sectoral non-coordinated processes that then also, in some way are not as efficient as a coordinated process could be. Similarly, in the NDCs, we have seen that the water sector has in the past not been very present, but now it's getting some more traction, and that is as well welcome. However, when we sit at the same table, climate, water stakeholders, it is important to come together with common understanding. And that is also not evident, but there has been quite some good progress in the past period. And actually, it would be presented later in this webinar, no? The shared definition about what climate resilient water and sanitation services mean and how we can bring this together to the table. It has been worked through the collaboration of over 100 partners, no, in this partnership, and we welcome this as it helps then having a common language in the discussions at country level. However, moving forward as well, we need to work more into the sectoral policy coherence. So we are having some progress in how climate and climate commitments, climate plans, national adaptation plans are integrating water. We see that also the water sector and the water policies need to be better at integrating climate risks, and also not least at the local level. So working not only at the policy level, but also when it comes to the let's say the field level, working with the water utilities, particularly those that are not in the main cities, service providers, rural areas, and those that have perhaps less initial capacity, both technical, financial, and human, to then address the pressing climate risk. I won't go into the finance aspects because I think Alex has already covered a lot of it. And in interest of time, I wanted to go to a final point for me, that is that we have to be very careful that we are now towards the progress in climate resilient water and sanitation services, but we have quite significant unfinished business in relation to having reliable services. We still have problems related to low water quality, to high non-revenue water, to insufficient tariff collection, to staff turnover at the service providers, etc. Right? So we have to act on all these things in addition to bringing the capacity to act against climate-related risks. So I wanted to make a word of attention about this, because we have to make sure that we are also working on the basic of reliable water and sanitation services so that they can also withstand climate risks. And of course, I welcome this new financing mechanism that was just presented, because in some cases, this can help as well to with the loss and damage after climate crisis, to try to rebuild also the basics of reliable water and sanitation services. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the rest of the webinar. Over to you.
Thank you, Alejandro, for those remarks, and thank you as ever for being such an active member of SWA Climate Task Team. The work has been brilliant with SIWI. Once again, thank you to all our keynote speakers. We are now transitioning into the second part of our webinar, wherein we will focus on the debriefing of COP29, and we will also outline our call to action for COP30. Now, next speaker. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker because he is our in-house climate policy expert, José Gesti. José, we appreciate your efforts in bringing us all together today. Please take us through the key highlights and takeaways from COP29. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anjani, and it's such a great pleasure to be able to address so many participants that have joined us today. So my mission here is in just a few minutes to try to give you a quick debriefing of highlights and key themes for our interest that happened at COP29 in Azerbaijan, in Baku, last November. But before I go into the matter, I would not give for granted that all of you understand exactly what is happening at a COP. Starting by the acronym, the COP refers to the Conference of the Parties. That means the parties means the countries that are signatory of the Paris Agreement and the Convention on Climate Change. There, the agenda is very much driven by the COP presidency. Last year, it was the Azerbaijani presidency as the COP happened there. The presidency sets the agenda for the duration of the conference and have the prerogative as well to launch new initiatives and dialogues. Importantly as well, at the Conference of the Parties, you may imagine as well a huge area where pavilions, thematic pavilions, government, country pavilions are also set with lots of discussions happening at the same time. And obviously, most importantly, COP is the place where climate negotiations take place. The countries, the parties to the agreements discuss on key agenda items. What I'm bringing to you is a very brief summary of some of these things that I have outlined, starting by a very important initiative and declaration launched by the Azerbaijani COP29 presidency. What you see on the screen is key highlights of the Baku Declaration on Water for Climate Action. That the COP29 presidency had a strong support from the World Meteorological Organization, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, as well as the United Nations Environmental Programme. And it was an initiative that launched a strong call for integrated approaches to combat the climate change impacts at the basin level and trying to foster greater regional and international cooperation, including transboundary water. There is a strong call as well in this declaration for the integration of water-related aspects into climate policy, namely the nationally determined contributions and the national adaptation plans. As you know, 2025 is a very important year for the revision of NDCs and the formulation of additional maps. More than 50 countries are signatory of this declaration, and also non-state partners such as SWA. We are also proud supporters of this initiative. The declaration of Water for Climate Action launched a Baku dialogue on water for climate action, which is expected to bridge discussions, water and sanitation discussions between COP and COP. The next slide, please. I will just highlight now some of the, at COP, it's a milestone for all of us working with climate. And we launched a lot of analysis and reports. And I just want to go quickly through a few of them. This one is something that happened at the Water for Climate Pavilion. We launched definition of, Alejandro has already alluded to it, of what constitutes climate resilient water supply and sanitation. I won't go into any detail because after me, we have the luxury of having a standalone presentation on this one. The next slide, please. Another thing that we're very proud to see happening, that it was launched at COP, is an additional guidelines from the Green Climate Fund on specific guidance on how to develop sanitation proposals to the Green Climate Fund, bearing in mind the diverse impacts of climate change across the whole sanitation chains from containment, from transport, treatment, disposal, etc., as well as the important opportunities to reduce greenhouse gases emissions. These new guidelines give you the opportunity to speak a climate rationale on how sanitation interventions can benefit from climate financing. The next slide, please. Another important launching that we feel very, very proud is the analytical brief on water for mitigation. This is a UN water initiative, and this brief gives us a lot of insights on how water is a critical component for different climate mitigation measures. So we want, as we see the revision of nationally determined contributions in countries, we invite all of you to consider insights that you can use through this analytical brief to try to better integrate mitigation aspects related to water and sanitation in the revision of nationally determined contributions. The next slide, please. Then I will touch upon now something that happened at the Water Pavilion, going from the launching of different initiatives into for you to get a snapshot of what can happen in a water pavilion. This is a picture of ourselves with colleagues from WaterAid facilitating a full-day discussion at the Water Pavilion on something that our previous speaker, Animesh, has explained, which is the importance of having water and sanitation featuring so prominently right now in the global resilience agenda. There, at the Water Pavilion, we have full-day discussions on the ongoing making of indicators against the targets of the global resilience framework, as well as something that we consider very important, which is like the landing of global agreements into reality on the ground. So we had a half-day discussions on how to make a global agreement a reality on the ground as soon as possible. The next slide, please. In relation to the climate negotiations that I said obviously take place, is the core part of the conference of the parties. I will come now with a brief summary of an important resolution for us, which is the resolution around the global goal on adaptation. And as we've been mentioning, the ongoing making of indicators against the targets. So it was agreed at COP29 that what we expect to see at COP30 this year in Belém, in Brazil, is a framework of no more than 100 indicators against all the targets of the global resilience framework. Some of them obviously will refer to water and sanitation. An important resolution as well was the launching of the Baku high-level dialogue on adaptation, which is going to secure an adaptation-focused discussion that goes from COP to COP, involving the COP presidencies of the incoming and ongoing presidency of the Conference of the Parties. Some important dates for 2025 have been already mentioned. As soon as mid-May, we are expecting to see the first cut of indicators against the global resilience framework. So here we'll have the opportunity to see the first cut of indicators for water and sanitation. We are expecting to have the mid-sessions of the Conference of the Parties that happens in Bonn, mid-June. Before that, already in April, we will have an App Expo that will discuss ongoing efforts on the making of and formulations of national adaptation plans. And this webinar is a roadmap, right? The kickoff towards COP30, just so that it's in your radar that COP30 will happen in November, mid-November. The next slide, and I'm coming to an end, Anjani. This is the final slide, just to tell you briefly some of the decisions that were adopted in relation to climate financing. COP29 in Azerbaijan adopted what is called the new collective quantified global goal on financing. You may have seen and heard in the news, it's targeting a mobilization of 300 billion annually by 2035. Animesh, Kumar has already told us extensively about the operationalization of the loss and damage fund. Projects are expected to get financed already this year. And finally, it's an important advancement in terms of carbon market mechanisms, with the operationalization of carbon markets to regulate international carbon credit trading. So I will leave it here. I hope you got a nice journey, quick brief of what happened in these 2 weeks at COP29. Back to you, Anjani.
Thank you so much, Jose. Moving on to our next speaker, I want to introduce Juliet Willetts, the Research Director and Professor at the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney. Juliet is also a member of SWA Research and Learning Constituency, and just recently we have been collaborating with UTS Sydney on a policy brief focused on gender and climate issues. But today, as part of the SWA Climate Task Team, Juliet has played a key role in supporting the task team in finalizing the definition of climate resilient water, sanitation, and hygiene systems, which she'll be presenting. Welcome, Juliet, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. So I will be sharing with you a little bit more detail on this sector-wide definition for water, sanitation, and hygiene services and their climate resilience. And firstly, why do we need such a definition? Well, I think all of you who are working on water-related issues would have recognized climate change is already impacting the different wash systems that we work on, whether it's extreme events or rising temperatures or salinity. All of these impacts are already affecting the ability to provide services to people. And without a shared definition, efforts have been quite fragmented. Different organizations have their own definition. And so having a shared definition means we can talk the same language, and particularly when we're doing so with people outside our sector, so that we have a more unified voice. And as has been mentioned in the webinar so far, with the global goal for adaptation putting a water target first, it makes it clear that climate resilient water and climate resilient sanitation need to be prioritized in national and global climate action plans, and we need a way to define what we mean by those in those action plans. Next slide, please. So the definition itself, this is the rather wordy definition. There's a reason why there are many verbs in this definition. It's because the definition needs to capture both adaptation and also mitigation dimensions of climate resilience. It needs to make sure we're not just talking about infrastructure. It also includes reference to service delivery, to governance, and to community engagement. And I'd encourage you to look at the document that sits behind this, the definition you see on the screen, so you can understand those broader definitions. But in terms of the words in front of you, the many verbs are actually very important. So things like anticipating about the use of climate risk assessments so that we prevent failures before they happen. The verb to cope with or to recover from are about how we can ensure that we're able to withstand climate shocks and we're able to rebuild better after disasters happen. And the word transform means sometimes we may be reaching adaptation, what's called adaptation limits. There may be absolutely such water scarcity in some areas that we need new and different ways of providing services. And so each of these verbs is important to think about as we plan and implement better wash services in the context of climate change. Also in the definition, minimizing emissions, to do that where that's possible, but of course not compromising the service in doing so. And lastly, an equity focus. The last part of the definition says that we must prioritize the needs of the most exposed, vulnerable populations. So that's those populations who are most impacted by climate-related disruptions. They should be at the center of our attention. Next slide, please. So how does having a definition strengthen climate action from the WASH sector? Well, it can support us, as we've heard about. There's opportunities to influence NDCs this year and also national adaptation plans in their different cycles. And those documents also mean that governments can attract more climate finance to WASH infrastructure and services. And thinking about climate finance, having a definition means that mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund. Those funding mechanisms require a very strong climate rationale, a strong evidence base and argument for why this should be climate financing. And having a definition helps us know, well, what kind of evidence, what kinds of processes do we need to demonstrate that we're putting in place? Thirdly, it standardizes monitoring, and there is a concurrent process led by WHO and UNICEF and the JMP and GLASS on looking at global indicators for wash, climate resilient wash. And so this definition is also supporting that effort. And lastly, it's a tool that can drive action at national and local levels and help embed climate resilient wash into, whether it's into policies or into investments or into implementation plans. And the last slide, please. So what next? What do we all need to do? So there are many people on this webinar, and this is our job, not just the people leading the webinar, but all of you who are listening. We need to advocate for policy integration. We can help encourage countries to include climate resilient wash in their various different strategies, documents, in both from the climate side and from wash. We need to strengthen as well the global collaboration across the different bodies working on the processes around COP, as you heard José just describe, and the UN water processes. And as we heard, there's efforts this year to develop the different indicators for the global goal for adaptation. And so the development of metrics that can be put into that process and that are appropriate for the wash sector, again, this definition can help us with that next step. And lastly, everyone needs to work on the area of financing. It might be climate finance, but also just normal financing mechanisms. Using these definitions and knowing the impacts that climate change is already happening, there's opportunity to work with many different actors to mobilize increased funding to the sector. So I hope that gives you a snapshot of the definition, and I would encourage you to read what sits behind it so that you can use it to good effect in your work. Thanks, and I'll hand back.
Thank you so much, Juliet, both for your expertise and initiative to be part of the climate task team and working through this. I now would like to welcome two speakers, Patience Mukuyu, the lead policy analyst at WaterAid and an active member of the SWA Climate Task Team, and Hanna Plotnykova, Environmental Affairs Officer at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. They will present the call to action that I teased earlier in my introduction and the opening of the session. This call to action is based on recent studies conducted by WaterAid, the Stockholm Environment Institute, UNECE, and SWA. This call encourages SWA partners and other key stakeholders. We have over 287 people on the webinar right now. So it's a call for action to all of you to actively engage in national processes related to national adaptation plans and nationally determined contributions. Welcome to you both, and I will hand it over to you, Patience.
Thank you, Anjani, and it's a pleasure and honor to be presenting on this topic today. I will switch off my video in a moment just to go through the presentation, and I'll come back towards the end.
No problem.
Next slide, please. So I thought maybe we could start with some definitions just to orient us on what we've been speaking about. The previous speakers have done a good job of laying a foundation, but maybe we can just do a quick run through of what we mean by this. So a national adaptation plan is a strategic process that helps countries identify and prioritize those actions that they need to adapt to climate impacts, while an NDC, or nationally determined contributions, outline a country's climate commitments under the Paris Agreement, focusing on both the mitigation and adaptation goals. But why should we then be integrated WASH into NAPs and NDCs? We've heard this from previous speakers, but basically water and sanitation are vital for climate resilience, and they directly impact human health as well as ecosystem health. and our Sustainable Development Goals. So why is it particularly important in 2025 that we do this? At COP28, there was a call to revise NDCs by 2025 and for all countries to develop their NAPs. And so this offers us an opportunity as the wash sector or the water supply and sanitation sector and other climate stakeholders to align align our efforts and to raise our ambition in this year. Next slide, please. So given this background, in the last year, 4 organizations, the UNECE, which is the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, the Stockholm Environment Institute, WaterAid, and the Sanitation and Water for All Secretariat have been working on studies that are separate but very complementary towards that common aim of understanding how better to integrate water sanitation and hygiene into climate policy. So preliminary results of these studies were presented in a joint session at COP29 last year in the Water Pavilion. But in this presentation, I'll just give a snapshot of each of these in the following slides, which culminate into our final call to action. Next slide, please. First, let's look at the analysis that was done by the UNECE, which looks at water and sanitation and how they are integrated in NDCs, as well as the integration of transboundary water management and cooperation. For this analysis, the UNECE used data from the NDC SDG Connections tool, which is developed and maintained by the Stockholm Environment Institute. This tool is based on data from all NDCs that were submitted to the UNFCCC as of the 31st of May 2024, which is about 144 countries at the time of analysis. So from this extensive exercise that they did, we see that there's a poor integration of these thematic areas into the NDCs. As you can see by the large amount of red on your screen, there's a large percentage of NDCs that are not covering transboundary water management and cooperation or water supply and sanitation within their NDCs. So if I just need to decipher that code, high priority means that we're looking at 3 or more activities included in the NDCs that are related to water supply and sanitation or to transboundary water management and cooperation. And if it's low priority, that means we have 1 activity or less. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in the joint Stockholm Environment Institute and Sanitation and Water for All analysis, we can then zoom in and see how exactly sanitation is currently reflected in NDCs. And from the pie charts on the screen, you can see that they identified over 8,000 SDG-related activities in the NDCs from 144 countries, that is on the left pie chart. But out of these, only 168 activities relate to SDG 6.2 and 6.3, which are on achieving sanitation and hygiene for all and improving water quality and reducing pollution. This means that only 2% of activities in NDCs relate to sanitation and hygiene priorities, even though sanitation-related activities account for over 15% of all SDG 6-related activities. Next slide, please. So when we move on to the National Adaptation Plans, or the NAPs, the UNECE analyzed 58 NAPs, which were submitted to the UNFCCC as of October 2024. In these NAPs, we see a higher level of integration of water supply, sanitation, and hygiene, as well as transboundary water management and cooperation, compared to what we see in the NDCs. This is because most of the climate priorities for water supply and sanitation, as well as transboundary water management and cooperation, are related to adaptation and resilience, and those have found an easier way into national adaptation planning. However, it's important to note that NDCs are not only meant for mitigation efforts, but can also contain adaptation components in them as well. So we use the same kind of key there, high priority, average, low priority, based on the number of activities that were represented in the NAPs. Next slide, please. So the previous studies have really shown us the trends in the NAPs and the NDCs of how water supply and sanitation are being featured in NDCs and NAPs. So in this slide where we present an assessment that was done by WaterAid across 9 countries where WaterAid operates, we came up with key criteria that we can use to assess how water supply is and sanitation and hygiene are actually integrated in NAPs and NDCs, and how we can elevate them in terms of the current formulation of indicators and the interventions that are presented. So out of our assessment, we propose that from the outset, NDCs and NAPs should be consultative and inclusive, covering all corners of society, including indigenous peoples and vulnerable groups. Second, water supply, sanitation, and hygiene interventions should be considered and integrated in other sectors to show the adaptation benefits across sectors, for example, health, food security, or education sectors. I was quite encouraged to hear from Animesh about the NAP guidelines that are coming up, and they seem to have a strong integration focus. So this is one of the recommendations or the criteria that we put forward in terms of assessing how WASH is integrated in NAPs and NDCs. Third, these identified interventions must have clear gender-responsive indicators and show the involvement of the relevant ministries, whether it's gender ministries, in the development of these NAPs. For example, the indicators can really show how many women or men or children will be benefiting from the proposed interventions. Fourth, it is important that the identified interventions are fully costed, showing the full extent of resources required, but also showing where the resources are coming from, whether it's externally or from national budgets. In his opening remarks, Alex mentioned how they've managed to mobilize quite a huge amount of resources from national budgets. So this is quite encouraging. And we do want the NAPs and NDCs to reflect how much governments are actually committing to implementing their own national plans and how much is going to be sourced externally. Lastly, given that we're currently in the phase where we are developing these global metrics under the framework for global climate resilience, the thematic targets that were talked about in the previous presentation, national level indicators should also seek to align with global metrics so that we have a harmonious way of reaching the global goal on adaptation. This list of assessment criteria may not be exhaustive, but we trust that it gives us a starting point for further deliberation. Next slide, please. So finally, out of the 3 studies, we propose 5 overarching joint recommendations, which are to incorporate comprehensive baseline assessments in our NDCs and NAPs, to promote consultative and inclusive stakeholder engagement, given the wide scope of climate impacts, and to develop a shared vision for adaptation and mitigation. We also want to create or leverage cooperative NAP and NDC legal and implementation frameworks, and to secure that much needed financing for climate resilient development programs. You see on your screen there that you can access this joint notes that we have developed together as our call to action. I'll now hand over to Hanna, who will speak a little bit more about transboundary water management and how it's being represented in the NDCs. Thank you. Over to you, Hanna.
Thank you, Patience, and thank you, colleagues, for inviting me. I would like just to make a few brief points specifically on transboundary aspects. Referencing to the recommendations provided earlier by Patience, I would like to add that actually it is very important to include transboundary assessment of river basins and share water resources. And also it is very important to revise transboundary agreements and to make them climate-proofed. In addition, it was mentioned to involve stakeholders, and here transboundary basin organizations are important, and they can also help to engage other stakeholders. We also need to harmonize transboundary adaptation and mitigation objectives across the riparian countries and to finance transboundary projects. And actually more information is found in this QR code in the dedicated research, which was conducted by UNEC. Can I have the next slide, please? And also more information overall on how countries can be supported with integrated transboundary water perspective can be provided by the Water Convention, which is the global legal and intergovernmental framework of the United Nations. It has currently 55 parties, a lot from Africa, not only from pan-European region as it was before, and also from Latin America and Middle East. And there is an intergovernmental task force on water and climate under the Water Convention. It is a unique intergovernmental body focused on transboundary water management and climate, and its next meeting will be soon on 21st of March. So you are invited to join in person, and there will be also web streaming. And it will be preceded by the global workshop on increasing climate resilience with focus on floods and health on 19th, 20th March. Both events will have a dedicated session on NDCs and particularly NEPs and integrating water, including transboundary aspects into NDCs and NEPs. And I'm going to put in the chat the dedicated links. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patience and Hannah. And of course, you can see all the email addresses for the follow-up questions. If you would want to reach out to the SWA Secretariat or the relevant presenters, you can see them here. Now we move on to the third part of our webinar. There will be a panel discussion. It is just before the interactive session that I would be moderating. José, over to you. We have representatives from Malawi and Uganda, and I look forward to that exciting panel discussion. Over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anjani. And we are so excited now to transition into this part of the webinar where we have a dialogue with two great colleagues joining from, as Anjani said, from Uganda and Malawi. I would like to first introduce our first panelist, Martha Naigaga, who is a senior environmental health officer and sanitation coordination, who has been working for more than 20 years at the Ministry of Water and Environment. We also have with us, we're really lucky to have both of you. We have as well Max Wengawenga, who is the Director of Policy and Planning for Water and Sanitation in Malawi. Max specializes in economic research and has served the government of Malawi for more than 15 years. I would like to have you on the screen, and I would like to start with you, Martha, to talk a little bit more on an experience that you've been driving in Uganda with the spirit of getting other participants in other countries from around the world, getting inspired perhaps by your experience, Martha. We know that in Uganda, you have been working with building what it's referred to the climate rational for water supply and for sanitation. I think we need Martha on the screen. Okay, perfect. So we know that you've been working with building that narrative, that rational, right, as to this interface between water and sanitation and hygiene and climate change. And this is leading obviously into having a powerful tool in your hands, right, for managing the integration of water and sanitation into climate national policy. And we also have learned that Uganda is one of the few countries in the world, indeed, that it's preparing a national adaptation plan that focuses on water and sanitation. So, Martha, over to you so that you drive us a little bit in a couple of minutes, your experience. What is it? Why did you get to do this, and how was the process?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, viewers and listeners, and all the members that are participating in this webinar. I would like to walk us through the journey that Uganda has taken when we were developing our climate rationale. And it was mainly from the fact that WASH was highlighted as one of the most vulnerable and high-risk sectors, and the vulnerability risk assessment conducted by the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda. But also this was further confirmed in the updated national determined contributions of 2022. Previously, when we had our first NDCs developed, we did not consider WASH as a priority sector. But this was highlighted and confirmed in the updated NDCs, which is officially our National Climate Action Plan. So it has been also highlighted that water is the main priority sector for adaptation in the NDCs, and also that as a country, adaptation is our key or priority action that has been identified for response to climate change. So our climate risk and vulnerability assessment has also been conducted for the WASH sector. We conducted a specific one for the WASH sector, and we did this with support from UNICEF and I think SIWI. And it has been a consultative process that involved both state and non-state actors, and also involved consultations both at the national and the subnational level, including from local governments. So our climate risk and vulnerability assessment went ahead to highlight the hazards that we face in the WASH sector, and mainly for us in Uganda, it has mainly been flooding, drought, water pollution, and landslides. And in that assessment, we went further to identify the exposures, the sensitivities, the vulnerabilities, and impacts on the different communities and ecosystems. In the NDC, key priority actions and commitments were highlighted. And as a country, we have gone ahead to develop sector-specific NAPs. We went ahead to do the Greek NAP at first, and followed by the one for Ministry of Health, the HNAP. And rightly behind it, we are developing the WASH NAP, which is in its advanced stages. And in there, we have been able to generate costed adaptation actions that have been also costed. And then we also know now how to implement them and increase the adaptive capacities and the resilience of communities and ecosystems at different levels. And this process also helped us to implement commitments in the NDCs, and relatedly, we were able to improve our reporting in the national level, but also on the global scene. During the process of developing our climate rationale, we were able to identify actions that reduce vulnerability and increase resilience and adaptive capacities, but also to find ways of linking all these to our overarching development plans as a country. We are now driving NDP3, but it is ending up this year, and we are already in advanced stages of completing our NDP4.
Martha, I think we are having some issues right now after.
Process has led to a lot of integration in the district plans, but also climate actions at the local levels in the districts, but also at the national level. Regarding our climate change policies, we now have what we call activated codes for adaptation. In the plans, we have been able to activate a clause which introduces the budget output codes. Previously, we were not able to track how money or budgeting is happening for the different adaptation measures in the different budgets of the different sectors. But because of our climate rationale that we developed, we are able now to look into the different budgets and see overall how is it being taken care of, how is climate actions being taken care of, also regarding to WASH. But also how the expenditures are made within the budget systems, both at the national and the subnational level. And currently now as a ministry, because of that, we issue certificates of climate compliance to the budget framework paper and also the specific programs as highlighted in our National Development Plan 3 on an annual basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martha. What an incredible journey that you have walked us through, hopefully serving as an inspiration for other countries. I would like to just highlight a couple of things that you said. The importance of understanding through a risk analysis, the hazards, the exposure levels, vulnerabilities, that has allowed you to come up with options within water and sanitation to overcome and reduce the exposure and the vulnerability. You have used that to not only integrate into the nationally determined contribution, but to develop a standalone national adaptation plan, which is going to have an important hook on costed analysis as well. So I think you have beautifully wrapped this up, Martha, and again, hopefully this serves other countries as an inspiration. We will move now to you, Max. I would like to also ask you a similar question, Max, in terms of a little bit, what is Malawi doing right now as we are placing such an emphasis on the revision of nationally determined contributions and formulation of national adaptation plans? If you can tell us a little bit what is going on. Also, we think this is a great opportunity, right, to highlight that Malawi is about to sign, and the president of Malawi is about to sign a presidential compact on water and sanitation, right, where you have done an amazing job as well integrating climate resilience, both adaptation and mitigation. So if you can elaborate a little bit on this journey as well, Max, and tell us how you see this with the spirit of, sharing an experience with this wide audience that we have today with us. Over to you, Max.
Thank you very much, José, and greetings across from Malawi. It's a great honor to be part of this very important conversation. So Malawi is actually in the process of revising the NDCs, just like many other countries across. So at the moment, we have just started the work with defining the scope, and we are grateful with the support that the partners also providing currently. UNDP is leading the support, but we are also getting huge interest from many partners as well. Our focal point, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Climate Change, is leading the process, and we are happy that the focal point does actually recognize the important role of the water and sanitation sector, that we are very highly involved in this process. So as we speak, we are actually already doing kind of reflecting on how the first NDC had actually covered the water and sanitation and hygiene sector. And this time around, we actually looking forward to seeing the WASH issues getting more pronounced because everyone now has really gotten the message that we can't talk of climate action and leave out the WASH sector. You do actually recall that not long ago, Malawi actually has suffered a series of climate-related disasters, and our sector has been one of the highly affected. And we've had the cyclone Naigaga, cyclone Hanna, and most recently the cyclone Fred. And that also links to the issue of the priorities we are developing actually in the presidential compact. You'd see the assessments that have actually taken place after these disasters hit us. Most of them actually recognized think that it was mostly we lost a lot of infrastructure, water-related infrastructure, taking us back several steps, in our effort to achieve SDG 6. And so as we speak now, we have actually isolated major areas which we really would love to see being reflected in the NDCs, including the emphasis on now prioritizing climate resilient wash infrastructure. This relates to the issue of having reticulated water supply systems in the rural areas. Experience has taught us that when these floods or disasters hit, we see that at least those who are connected through these reticulated water supply systems, they survive, unlike the standalone borehole. So it's also in the national policy as we speak. And also taking you to the issue of the presidential compact, the high level head of state initiative. We have actually most of the priorities. There is this emphasis on linking whatever intervention that is being proposed, that it should have this climate resilience. And we are happy to say that so far the process getting a lot of support, and we are just in the final stages, and soon we'll be seeing that the compact getting signed and launched. So this is the experience from us from Malawi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate, because you are bringing also important insights to this discussion. It's reflecting right on some climate impacts in your country that have led to reverse progress that you've been making over the last years and decades. And based on those assessments, you are able to prioritize action that you are not only aiming at reflecting in climate policy, such as the NDC, but you are also bringing climate resilience, as you have emphasized, into water and sanitation initiatives, such a high-level initiative that we are driving right now in Malawi at a head of state, mobilizing political will at head of state level through a water and sanitation compact that it's incorporating climate. So I think you've made a good emphasis on this both ways: the integration of water issues and sanitation in climate policy, and climate into water and sanitation initiatives and policy. I think that was beautifully articulated, Max, and we really value your insights and inputs to this webinar. And we truly want to continue collaborating with you both in Uganda and in Malawi. I thank you both, Martha and Max, for your valuable contributions. Back to you, Anjani.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Max. We have a lot of questions coming in, and we are trying to take them in the Q&A section. So keep them flowing. Now we will run an interactive session. Jose, if you could please share the Zoom polls with us. Okay, Jose, that's efficient. Okay, so I hope you can all see the Zoom poll on your screen. What we are trying to do with this Zoom poll is to understand where the country's progress is at, because it helps us raising awareness about the gaps in climate policy integration. And I see already a lot of people are answering, which is wonderful. So the question is, how well do you think water supply and sanitation are integrated in your country's climate policy, that is the nationally determined contributions and the national adaptation plans? Okay, around 53 people have answered. We are 237. I'm sure we can do better than this number, but in the interest of time, I will just keep it on for 20 more seconds before sharing the results from this. Please let us know in your understanding how well water supply and sanitation are integrated in your country's climate policies, NDCs, and NAPs. Let's end this poll. Over 100 people have answered, and then let's share the results, please. Okay, so I hope you can see the results on your screen, but I can quickly read them out as well. So 11 people have responded. So 101 people have voted, 11 people have responded saying that it is water and sanitation are fully integrated. Around 37 people have said out of 101 who've responded that it's partially integrated. And at least 6 people have said that it is not integrated at all, with 29 people saying that there is a limited integration. Let's go to the next poll. Jose, can we move on to poll 2, please? Okay, I think maybe there's some issue with sharing. No problem. So what we'll do, because we have a lot of questions, and if we still have, oh, okay, there was some delay, but it's there. Thank you, Jose. So with this question, we are trying to understand if your organization is involved in the ongoing revision of your country's NDC or the formulation of National Adaptation Plan. If your organization has been active in the nationally determined contributions revision that's ongoing in the countries or the formulation of National Adaptation Plan, please vote accordingly. The options are yes, we are actively engaged, we have been consulted but not meaningfully involved. It also helps us understand the level of participation in these ongoing processes at the country level, and also from the perspective of water, how well water and sanitation sectors are able to engage in this. So let's quickly, 89 people have voted so far. I'm sure we can do better. We are over 200. Just in the interest of time, let's end this poll because I see 199 people have voted. Let's share the results, please. At least 32 people are saying out of 99 that they have been actively engaged in this process. 14% are saying that we have been consulted but not meaningfully involved. Around 23% are saying that no, we are not involved at all. And 5% have said that my country is not currently revising its NDC. Thank you so much. If we can quickly take poll 3, that would be great. Jose, back to your technical skills on the Zoom side right now. If we can share it, okay, we have it. So the third question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge in integrating climate resilience and mitigation into water supply and sanitation policies? Now, we've tried to give you a few options here, but if you want to add, if you want to make this an open-ended question, please feel free to add more information in the chat box if you would like. So the options are lack of political will and leadership, limited access to climate finance for water and sanitation, weak coordination, or insufficient technical capacity. So we have at least 71 people have voted so far. I'm just going to keep it on for 10 seconds more before we move on to the closing remarks. Okay, let's close this poll and let's share the results. 105 people have responded so far. 23% out of the people who voted are talking about lack of political will and leadership as the biggest challenge. This speaks closer to SWA Partnership's mission and vision statement, and also our objectives of strengthening political will. Then 33% have said that there's limited access to climate finance for the sector. with 29% saying weak coordination and then between climate, water, and sanitation actors. Okay, this was really quick, and we were able to gather a lot of information from you all. So thank you so much. And we have responded to a lot of questions in the chat box. However, we know that we've not been able to take a lot of questions because the speakers have been coming in and out. We'll try our best to share the recording and the slides with you all, whoever has joined via email. And if you have any questions, you can, of course, reach out to Sanitation Water for All staff and Secretariat members. I now hand over to Lesley Porres. Lesley is the co-chair of SWA, High Level Political Dialogue Working Group. She's the lead policy analyst, water sanitation and hygiene financing at WaterAid. Over to you, Lesley, to bring us to a close with some remarks, please. You're on mute, Lesley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Anjani. Thank you for the lovely introduction. It is welcome or hello to everyone. It is a bit of a challenge, I think, to summarize what has been an incredibly rich conversation. And I want to thank, first and foremost, the SWA Secretariat and Climate Task Team in particular for bringing this, bringing all of these different fantastic voices and viewpoints together. And I do think that it shows an important role that SWA has been playing in the climate conversation on behalf of all of us as a water and sanitation community. So to summarize the journey that we've just been on all together, I think we can start from sort of the UNFCCC and COP29, which many of us were present at, in terms of the new action and direction and opportunity that it set for us together as a community. And again, because of the hard work that SWA has been playing over time, we have been figuring more prominently into that conversation. I also want to highlight, and we heard, I guess I'm looking at my notes, I guess I'm going to try to skip around a little bit, but we heard about the different roles provided to us, you know, Animesh as well as other, and Juliet talked about, and José, of course, talked about the different ways that the GGA is operating, and also the Loss and Damage Fund, and the different ways that we can make sure that our voices are heard and integrated into that process and generate the presence of water and sanitation in indicators. And I thought this was quite interesting in terms of indicators, not only that are explicitly related to water, but the other host of target themes. So this point, and this also ties into points that were raised by Alejandro, that you know, it should be a given that water and climate communities sit together and collaborate, but actually that we are far from that and working towards it. And sort of, but also even before we get to that, there are new opportunities for coordination. But of course, as a sector, we also need to be coherent as a group. And again, I will highlight the role that SWA has been playing in sort of trying to provide that coherence that has allowed us, in my opinion, to be much more effective of late. I think we also heard quite strongly back to Alex in terms of, you know, not only Alex, but starting with Alex, the incredibly important role of finance. And this was a theme that definitely penetrated across the different points of conversation today. And the linkage not only of finance, but also to that high level political will and mobilization that is needed, right? When Alex was talking about the role of GWP, there was also the incredible importance highlighted of the African Union and also of the G20. So these are some of sort of, you know, and this also ties into Hanna later coming in and highlighting the UNECE and the role, you know, because a lot of this is, again, goes above a national level and goes up to the communication between and across countries, between and across regions. I think we also heard about the important role of, but even before you escalate it up to have those regional conversations, you also do have to have the national level conversations. So we heard really practical steps for how to engage more deeply in getting water and sanitation clearly embedded in the nationally determined contributions and the NAPs. And I was really inspired, as intended, really inspired by what Uganda has been doing to even create its own standalone NAP, not simply integrated, but also highlighting this importance of water by creating a standalone NAP. And again, tying it back into political will at the national level. Max, you really, from Malawi's case, highlighting the role that global compacts and other such calls to action can really do for mobilizing political will and keeping country governments accountable, right? And I also think that, and again, I think the Malawi example was a reminder, first and foremost, that these changes are happening, right? We have to start taking action now. It's not enough to just think, oh, we can plan for the next 5-year cycle now, and the importance of really taking action. Juliet was very clear about the different ways and opportunities for us to be very practically engaged and not simply saying we need to do more and do better. And it wasn't, and I should say it wasn't just Juliet, it was also patients really digging into, my own colleague, I'll call out, digging into the NDCs and the NAPs and really practical actions, and also the importance of having very clear criteria that can guide us as a community, which also ties into the work that SWA has led in collaboration with other networks locally for the development of standard definitions that can be universally applied and across, so that we aren't only talking to ourselves, but it is immediately clear to everybody else who is engaging in these conversations what we exactly mean. I think we've all been together for quite a long time this morning or afternoon, depending on where you join us from. And again, I want to thank you all for giving your time, for the participants for sharing what they know and what they've been doing, but then also for the group of all of us online here to really think about what we've been able to learn today and also put it into action. So maybe next time we're calling on you and highlighting the role that you have played in this really important and ongoing conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Lesley. 90 minutes summarized in 4 minutes. They're a mammoth task, but very well done. We close the session now. We'll be sharing the slides. We will be sharing the recording. There will be a survey at the end of when we close the session. There will be a survey form for you. It would be great for us to have your feedback. Thank you and bye for now. Join us for session 2 if anyone from your organization has missed this webinar. And thanks again to all the speakers, presenters, and all those people who were working the back-end logistics for this webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.